These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs.
Tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
Market Journal Television for Agricultural Business Decisions is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm Bryce Duskett, and thank you for joining us today on Market Journal. As you can see, we're out and about again this week, and we come to you from the 2025 Weed Management Field Day, which is taking place near Clay Center, Nebraska. There have been some important developments happening around the state that you want to be aware of. That includes tar spot being confirmed in several Nebraska counties just this past week. We'll get an update on that a little bit later in the show. Luke Beckman from Central Valley Ag, he will join us to discuss the latest trends that he's observing in the grain markets. And of course, we'll get some tips on weed suppression when it comes to your crop fields. All of that is straight ahead on this week's show, but we begin by heading out and into the field. For this week's update, at the beginning of the week, I had the chance to travel out to Western Nebraska to catch up with a longtime friend of mine to see how things are going out in the fields near Bayard, Nebraska. Here's that discussion. Well, just south of Bayard, Nebraska, you'll find a small town called Reddington. That's where we're at this week for our In the Field update. Catching up with David Schuler at Schuler Angus also has row crops and alfalfa. So get an update here when it comes to the crops from David. Let's talk about the whole operation, though. I mentioned there's livestock. That's a big aspect of what you guys do.
Yeah, so we're pretty diversified with seed stock. Red Angus is our main flagship operation with my family. But we feed our own feedstuffs and sell some corn as well and grow our own dry matter as well, like millet and alfalfa and oats and stuff like that. So
we've got the cornfield behind us. When was planting for you guys?
Yeah, so we started planting May 4th and ended around May 14th, trying to get it all on the ground. Got some good rains with it, so before it got real wet.
Talk about the moisture. You're turning pivots on here this week, it sounds like.
Yeah, it sure got hot this week, and the sandy grounds doesn't hold that moisture that we were blessed with earlier, so we really got to get our pivots going, get the chemication going on all of them. But this will be the first time they've been going around, which is unique for my lifetime that they've been able to make it this far as well.
Also have your hay crop. Have you got your first cut of your alfalfa done?
Yep, we just finished that up yesterday. We ensiled it, put in some haylage with triticale and alfalfa together so we can get that off so the next crop can get going, just in case it would get rained on, so we can get hopefully 3 more off of that circle.
You have cattle as your main focus. I'm sure you're always thinking about cattle and grazing and different opportunities with them. And to that point, you're doing something unique where within your corn, you're planting some turnips. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so kind of old-fashioned this aspect of inter-row ripping, trying to break up the compaction that our cows put on through the winter months. And with that opportunity, as we go over it, we like to try to get, with a Gandy box, turnips within the rows and get their roots established before the canopy of the corn, and then it'll kind of go dormant and it'll just look like it's almost on the verge of dying all through the wet months of July and August. But then when we harvest it, whether we chop it or we combine it, it'll then come to life, and as well as the stalks of the cows are eating in the fall, they'll also have that turnips as well. Just trying to get some cover crops and get as most use as possible off our farmland in the winter months.
Okay. When it comes to your grazing pastures, you were showing me a green strip through one of your fields, your pastures that is. What was going on there?
Yeah, so we're on this new rise of Rejuva, this spray they put on through a plane to allow the cheatgrass that is just terrible in Western Nebraska. It's invasive from Eurasia. That we can't get any use of that from the cattle perspective. So it sprays on pastures through airplanes and allows it to go dormant for 5 years and allow the native grasses to reestablish themselves and hopefully choke out that cheatgrass after 5 or 6 years. And it's seen tremendous results here in Western Nebraska, and I hope we continue to work on the funding for it, whether that's helped through cost share projects and through the USDA or the agricultural services, because it'll change our native lands to back where they used to be. And it's just so much greener where we sprayed and it's been 3 or 4 years now on some of those test plots, and now we're trying to get sections done at a time, just hopefully cut back on this invasive species.
finally? You get your cattle turned out to pasture, or is that still upcoming?
Yes. Again, yesterday, while we were ensiling all of our alfalfa, we got our last 200 cows bred and out to pasture, so we can finally see the green grass and red cows like Christmas in June and July, that I like to say. Allow our genetics to hit the ground, hopefully here in February and March, and then continue to service the commercial cattle industry.
Well, it's a good sight out here in Western Nebraska when everything is green. That's the case right now as we're catching up with David Schuler by Redington, Nebraska. Always a pleasure to connect with producers all around the state. And as a reminder, we would love to feature your operation here on Market Journal, discuss your operational goals and how you're trying to achieve them. We'd love to hear from you. So simply direct an email our way or get in touch on social media. We'd love to head out for in your direction here on Market Journal. We move along now, and another threat for corn producers is emerging at the moment. Tar spot has been confirmed in nearly a dozen Nebraska counties and counting. However, if tar spot is creeping into your fields, it may be best to let nature run its course, at least for the time being. Market Journal's Mike Straub got some important advice on how to approach this threatening pathogen.
Tar spot was confirmed in V6 through V9 corn in several Nebraska counties and other states throughout the week of June 15, 2025. Early season development has been common in other states where the fungus has existed for a few years. Scouting efforts should be intensified in fields with a history of the disease and pivot irrigated corn.
So tar spot has begun to develop and has now been confirmed in over a dozen counties in Nebraska and in several other states too. It's drawing a lot of attention for that because this is the earliest that we've seen tar spot in Nebraska. But I want to caution everyone who's alarmed about it that this has been normal in other states where they've had the disease for several years, and now so have we in some of those eastern counties. And so I think early development of tar spot's probably going to be more normal for us moving forward. There's a few other things I want to make sure that everyone is aware of, though. I know our first reaction is to do something. We want to react, we want to spray, but I want to caution everybody, and we recommend actually to not spray at this time. Most of the corn where tar spot has been confirmed is about the 6 to 9 leaf stage, and this is pretty early versus some of the data, the fungicide results that we're seeing out of the multi-state research led by Purdue University. And we've been talking about that across the state a lot. And so if you'll remember, the best timings for fungicide application for both disease control and for return on investment is actually between about tassel emergence, or what we would call VT, and the milk stage, or R3. And that was even when tar spot developed very early there, like V6 or 7, like in some of those years in Indiana. And so that's still, I think, going to be our safest recommendation. This early development is a good cue, though, that we need to start looking for it where you've had disease before and to regularly scout for it, because now you can watch and monitor how it's increasing in your fields and the hybrids that you have planted. There's a few things to keep in mind about tar spot. And, this is a fungus. It reacts very strongly to temperature, and especially temperatures that are in the 60s and 70s. And even if those occur at nighttime, and we're having wild temperature swings right now. And, we've hit 100, we've been down in the 60s, maybe even cooler. And those hot days are not going to kill this fungus, but it might slow it down. But just know when we return back to cooler temperatures, or when we cool fields off with pivot irrigation, we know that disease can pick right back up again. And so it's important that we keep monitoring this. And so as you look at making applications later on, if you need to do that, we know that fungicides that have a combination of active ingredients from multiple classes, from 2 or 3 fungicide classes, 3, 7, and 11, they do the best job in controlling tar spot. And whether or not you're using name brand products or even mixtures of generics, we would expect similar results from that. And there might be ways to reduce input cost if you need a fungicide later. As further incentive to not spray now, I want to warn everybody that a lot of the fungicides that do work against tar spot, they're restricted to being used only twice in a season. And so if you spray now and you get in a really serious situation with tar spot later on during grain fill, and you spray, say, at VT, which has been more common. Uh, you wouldn't be able to legally make a second application or a third application after that of some of these products. And so there's a lot of parts to this that we should consider. And as long as we spray tar spot before disease exceeds about 5% severity on the ear leaf, we're still able to get ahead of it. And I want people to understand that. And so please reach out to us in Nebraska Extension, and also there's a lot of resources. If you have questions, go online to the Crop Protection Network. There's fungicide efficacy data there. In fact, it's the same that's in our Guide for Weed, Disease, and Insect Management, the EC 130 from Nebraska Extension. It's free on the Crop Protection Network, so you can see the most up-to-date data we have from universities across the United States. And let us know if you have questions. Send samples to the UNL Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic for help. When you're looking for tar spot in the field, you're going to look for little black dots on the leaves. Now, don't be confused, though. The most common black dots right now is insect frass. And so these black dots caused by the fungus that causes tar spot are usually on both the top and on the bottom side underneath as well as it pushes through. And they're raised a little bit above the surface, and they cannot be washed off, where sometimes we can wash off the insect frass. And so, again, if you need help, be sure and submit samples to the UNL Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic.
It is important to monitor disease severity and changes, especially during grain fill stages, as well as sending samples to the University of Nebraska Plant and Pest Diagnostic Center for tar spot testing. When scouting for early disease development, it is recommended to focus scouting efforts in the innermost pivot spans.
Well, joining us this week for our Market Journal Market segment is Luke Beckman from Central Valley Ag. Luke, we appreciate you joining us here on the broadcast once again.
Thanks for having me on, gentlemen.
Well, let's start with the big news that really took place over the weekend with continued tension over the Middle East, but really got escalated discussion of a ceasefire. How has that impacted the grain markets in particular here across the country?
Sure. Well, when the news broke over the weekend of the U.S. strikes in Iran, the nuclear sites really had an energy market implication, right? A lot of global crude oil moves through the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran is a key global exporter of crude oil. So naturally, you would expect some upward pressure as we deal with conflict over in the Middle East again. So crude oil initially had traded up to $78 a barrel, gapped higher. And by the time we finished the Monday session, crude oil was $10 off of its open. We finished the day at $68 a barrel, which is wild. So just a massive negative day on the charts as we dealt with changing information and seeing the conflict maybe not escalating like many had feared initially. So crude oil has continued to tumble throughout the week. Today we're talking on Wednesday, and it's at least stabilized. So why is that important to agriculture? Well, really corn and now soybeans more so as we move forward are really tied to the energy markets in a big way with ethanol and renewable diesel on the soybean side. So, these are things that can impact the price of corn and soy. And, you've got rains that are contributing to the crop here in the U.S. at the same time. And so there's just a lot of negative things happening as the energy markets have tumbled. We've broken chart support in the corn market in particular. And so the path of least resistance has been down. We've seen soybean oil come under some pressure. That was a week after we saw the positive RVO numbers come out that were higher volumes than expected, the week prior. So soybean oil has been on a little bit of this ride too, with a really good week last week. And now with what crude oil is doing, soybean oil back under a little bit of pressure, which is impacting crush margins in the soybean market in a related way.
Luke, you bring up the pressure, the continued downward pressure we've seen in the corn market. At this point, we're getting pretty darn close. Perhaps it's there before the end of the week, but is sub $4 futures our reality for corn?
Well, it's possible. We're getting close. We're about a dime away as of, this recording on your front month, July, and we're getting ready to roll out of July futures into September. September is actually a little bit of a discount to the July futures. So cash corn values, unfortunately, have a 3 in front of them, which is wild. When you look at our old crop balance sheet, we'll get an update on that on July 11th. But, we've got a pretty tight carryout in the corn market for the United States. And so fair market value for corn, if you look at nothing but a stocks to use ratio for old crop balance sheet, it's $1 higher than where we are today, legitimately. So, it doesn't add up in that sense. I think what the market sees, though, is we've got large corn acres this year. We've had no weather threats in a broad sense across the United States so far. And the other one that maybe hasn't gotten as much press is what's happened in South America. Their safrinha crop, they are tracking towards a record safrinha corn crop in South America. 60 days ago, that was not the case. They were extremely dry, they were short on precip, and they were entering a period of time where they typically don't get little to no rainfall. So they've had some atypical rains late season that have totally bailed them out, and now they're in a position to produce a record corn crop after producing a record soybean crop. So I would say the combination of those three things has really put us where we are today with respect to the corn market.
When it comes to the soybean market, Luke, we did see that nice bump in soybean prices on the futures market because of that announcement with some policy changes coming out of Washington, D.C. But since then, we've really seen us fall off the wagon a little bit. The reasons behind that are?
I think it's rooted probably in the corn market. If you look at corn, if you look at the energy markets, like we opened with at the top, those are problematic. Soybeans had kind of reached the upper end of their charts in a technical sense. So they had kind of reached an overbought territory, so they were ripe for a little bit of a correction, but pretty hard for the soybean market to go up when corn is making new lows also. So they are related in terms of how they trade. So soybeans, I think, as we go forward, probably will hold up better than the corn market will. Just simply because of reduced acreage. With all that said, we do get the updated planted acreage report from the USDA on June 30th. So next Monday, we will see that survey-based data from the USDA. They will also have a quarterly grain stocks report, which gives us some insight into where our old crop stocks are for corn, soybeans, and last year's wheat crop. So that's going to be pretty telling. And obviously we're watching the acreage number. Pre-report estimates as of today have those acres fairly static, up just slightly from the planting intentions number that we saw at the end of March. Quarterly grain stocks will be interesting on the corn market. Many have surmised that really the corn market's under pressure because our feed and residual demand is overstated in the old crop balance sheet. A quarterly stocks report like the one we're going to see next Monday is the piece of data that helps us know whether that's true or not. So we'll take a look at what that stocks report has to say on Monday. Feed and residual could be overstated. We had a lot of milo that was fed in the Southwest. We've had wheat that was fed in the Southwest that's maybe displaced some corn this year. Or the third possibility is that last year's crop was understated with the revision that the USDA gave us in the January report. So all of that information will get sorted out as we see that stocks report next Monday.
A big thanks to Luke for taking time to connect with us this week. And we want to remind you that we'd love to hear from you. What's on your mind, whether it's grain or livestock? Go ahead and email us or get in touch on social media so I can pass your question along for one of our future guests. Corn and soybean production may not be simple, but it's a known quantity that works. So part of the challenge of working small grains into a corn-soybean rotation is economics. Making small grains pay. And all of that still comes down to managing the crop for the results you want. You can learn more about how to add small grain into your rotation in the latest issue of the Nebraska Farmer. It is now time to check in with Mr. Weather. That is Eric Hunt, our chief meteorologist here at Market Journal. Eric, where I'm standing right now, got some decent rain, about 1.5 inches just the last couple of days near Clay Center. As we turn to the next 7 days, though, how are we shaping up across the Cornhusker State?
Well, thanks, Bryce. I don't necessarily see the faucet shutting off this week. Reaching will be prominent across the northwestern United States here this weekend. Northwesterly flow aloft here in the north central United States. We'll have chances of showers and thunderstorms Saturday into Saturday night across the northern portion of the state. And I think chances will be pretty good across the southern and eastern section of the state Sunday afternoon into maybe early Monday morning. In terms of total precipitation, now again, we're not looking at anywhere close to what we had this last week, but we should pick up some precipitation statewide and a reasonable chance of picking up a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of rain across portions of east central Nebraska Sunday night into Monday. Do think the first portion of the next work week will be a little on the dry side, maybe isolated showers. As we move to the later portion of the week, we'll have a cutoff low moving into the southwest very slowly. We'll be tapping into some tropical moisture that may spill over in the central plains. So I do think starting Thursday night into Friday, probably going through the weekend, we're going to have at least a couple of chances for showers and thunderstorms across the state and across the broader region. Don't think we're looking at a total washout for the 4th, but do be prepared for the possibility of having some rain during this period of time. Your P model does show above average favored across the eastern half of the state, with maybe possible pockets of above average for the next week or so across portions of western Nebraska as well. CPC shows above average being favored pretty much across the entire country. In terms of temperatures this next week, I think we're going to be mostly right around seasonal averages in the mid to upper 80s. We might be cracking 90 a couple times later in the week in some portions of southern Nebraska. But for the most part, though, we're not looking at any major heat or major cool spells coming into the state. CPC shows above average being favored across the northwestern United States, where that ridging will be a little more prominent. Cooler here, we're going to have more precipitation than usual. I don't think we're looking at any major heat coming in, at least the first half of July. We'll probably have a couple warm days, but I think the first half of July, generally speaking, will be relatively good across most of Nebraska, across a lot of the Corn Belt. But as we get to the later portion of the month, the MJO being here in phase 2 and 3, which is basically the Indian Ocean, historic precedent would suggest that there's going to be a possibility of having ridging build back up here into the central and eastern portion of the United States. That does mean there's going to be a chance of picking up some big heat as we head to the last part of July, if this does indeed come to fruition. CPC shows above average favor across the western United States. Not much of a strong signal across a lot of our area. I mean, maybe a little bit above average, but I do think that the first half of the month will be generally average, maybe slightly cooler. Back half of the month, though, we may need to watch out for the heat to come back. Precipitation amounts, very heavy precipitation Monday night across portions of southeastern Nebraska. Heavy precipitation Tuesday evening across portions of southwestern and western Nebraska. This was Sunday night here across portions of the Sandhills. And then very, very heavy precipitation across portions of central Nebraska on Wednesday. Soil moisture, where we did not pick up the precipitation here across portions of Thayer and Fillmore counties, still pretty dry. We've also been very windy last weekend. So again, we are seeing a tremendous increase in the amount of days with wind gusts over 30 miles an hour in the state the last 20, 25 years. Tepid precip roundup, weekending June 21st, 2025. Back to you, Bryce.
Eric, thanks for that update. We sure appreciate it. Finally today, as we mentioned at the top of the show, we're out here at the sunny South Central Ag Lab for the 2025 Weed Management Field Day. And what a better way to wrap up this week's edition of Market Journal than getting some advice from the folks out here leading these sessions when it comes to mitigating weeds in your fields. We join now with a Nebraska Extension educator to get the latest.
Very different than cereal rye or wheat type of crop. The major goal is just to teach how integrated weed management can help for controlling weeds such as Palmer amaranth and water hemp, particularly in our corn and soybean production. And because those weeds, particularly Palmer amaranth, has evolved resistant to number of herbicides, so relying only on chemicals will not help. So overall message for this field day was just to adopt integrated weed management options that includes including cover crops, for example, cereal rye cover crop. We also had a project about hairy vetch, how you can utilize for weed suppression and which can provide some additional nitrogen to our corn and sorghum production. We had a number of other projects in soybean for weed suppression and weed management. We had a number of studies in soybean. Number one is how is the difference it can make for weed management when you plant soybean early, sometime in mid-April versus in first week of May in combination with herbicides. And we used like compact row spacing, 15-inch row spacing, which can help to suppress weeds. We also had a project about planting some cereal rye cover crops such as barley or oat 1 month before planting soybean, and then directly plant soybean when those oat and barley were active and green. So it has provided some good integrated early season Palmer amaranth suppression. So this is the time of the year when Palmer amaranth will be somewhere between 2-inch to 10-inch height. The only option will be right now in soybean particularly to use some post-emergence herbicides. We don't really have many options, but you need to remember what herbicide-resistant trait you have planted. There were some instances this year when grower applied some wrong herbicide in wrong type of soybean. So first thing I would recommend is you need to make sure whether you have planted XtenFlex soybean or if you have planted Enlist soybean or any other type of soybean, then you have to select your post-emergence herbicide accordingly. So my message is not think weed management as a one-year deal. They have to think about a systems approach and they have to do the best job they can for management of particularly Palmer amaranth in soybean so it can produce no seeds at all. So zero seed production for Palmer amaranth will be the greatest message I can do. So for that, they can do whatever they can. Number one, don't let Palmer to emerge. They can use some pre-emergence herbicide or use some fall planted cover crops to suppress early season growth of Palmer amaranth. And second thing they can do is if Palmer amaranth will emerge, don't let them to produce seeds. Means they can do their best job to control them by using post-emergence herbicides or by using some other methods. The third thing is if they will produce seeds, then try to do their best job so those seeds do not go back to the soil. So cleaning combine, maybe hand harvesting the top portion or inflorescences of the Palmer amaranth plant can reduce the overall seed bank addition. So we don't need to deal with them in next few years.
Always some great advice out here at these extension field days. If you did happen to miss this one or one of the several events that took place over the past week, have no fear. Nebraska Extension has a summer calendar with all of their events. Be sure to bookmark that extension event calendar on your web browser to keep up with the events happening in your area. Well, that is going to do it for this week's edition of Market Journal. Let you know that if you missed one of our stories, you can head on over to the Market Journal YouTube channel, where we invite you to subscribe and join in on the conversation. We hope to have you right back here next time. But until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.